Chapter 8. This is Sky. Squeals of children rang through the air as Dylan pulled into the driveway of a cream-colored ranch house. A boy and two girls, between 6 to 10 years of age, ran through the yard chasing each other. The oldest girl took the lead, her brown hair streaming out behind her as her bare legs pumped below her pink t-shirt and shorts. A quick twist to glance behind her was the girl's undoing. Her brother, who was close enough to use that short distraction to catch up, touched her shoulder. "Tag," he shouted. It was odd watching the normal scene. It seemed like so long ago since Sky sat on her front porch and saw the neighborhood children playing the same game. Where are all those children now? Too loud, Dylan mumbled. They're kids. Yeah, and I want them to stay alive. To play again another day. Sky grimaced. They were too loud, hadn't she and Dylan just worried about every small noise they made at the last house? Dylan mistook her expression. I don't mind them playing. No, I understand. They are very loud. It's just. I don't know, sad. Dylan nodded. It is. At the rumble of Dylan's truck in the driveway, a barrel-chested man with mahogany-colored hair came to the door. He held a rifle in both hands, ready if he needed to be, but on seeing Dylan he set it down, tipping it against the doorframe. A big smile broke out across his face. Dylan waved out the window while he explained Dan's situation to Sky. Dan is trying to keep his family away from everyone, so make sure the kids don't get too close. Dan waved his kids closer to him as Dylan opened the door of his truck. Dylan slammed the door shut and leaned against the vehicle as if to tell Dan he would stay right there. He said, "Hey," and introduced Sky with a wave. Sky popped up onto the window ledge again and greeted him and the kids. Dan seemed taken aback by her presence, but the children jumped with excitement. "Don't mind them," Dan said as he laughed with affection at his brood. "They're like little puppies sometimes, and they haven't seen anyone in a while. I pulled them out of school the second the news broke about the AG flu. Kept my whole family right here on this little patch of ground, hermit style. Not a single one of us has gotten sick." "That is wonderful," Sky said with a grin. One of the girls had pulled their mother to the door and pointed to Sky. The woman's gaze bounced from Sky to Dylan and back to Sky again. She dried her hands on a tea towel as she introduced herself as Martha. With all the questioning expressions, Sky decided she needed to explain her situation as quickly as possible before the whole mountain fired up with gossip about her and Dylan. But as she told Dan and Martha of her plans, the little light in their eyes didn't go away. "Oh well, there isn't anything else I can do. Let them think what they want." "So do you need anything?" Dylan asked Dan. "Nothing big. If you come across some of those candies the kids like, I'm sure they'd be grateful for them." "Candles," Martha blurted. "We need those, or a lantern or two. It gets so dark up here at night now without the outside lights working." Dylan pulled a little tablet out of his back pocket and wrote the items down. "I want a matchbox truck," said the boy. "The one with red flames on the side." Dan shoved his boy behind him. "Pay no attention to him." He turned to his son. "This isn't like ordering at McDonald's, Jake. This is for important stuff." Dylan continued to scribble in his notebook, then looked up at Jake. "I put it on the list. In case I come across it." The boy smiled. "Thanks." Sky could see Jake's request had stirred up envy in his sisters. "You'd better ask the girls now, or you'll be in trouble with them." Dylan laughed and took their orders. Any kind of art supplies for one, and a doll for the other. Dylan sighed. It was time for the bad news. "We stopped by Smith's." "Oh, yeah?" Dan asked. "How are they doing?" Dylan shook his head. Martha pulled the children away from the door, and Dan nodded for Dylan to continue. "We came on Debbie, sittin' up against a tree." Dylan said. "She was already dead. Apparently out sick and wandering. Not sure about the rest of the family. They're just gone." Dylan pointed to the trees. "Out there in the forest or picked up and taken to town, I don't know. Both their cars were there." Dylan rubbed his palm across his chin. I'd be watchin' if I was you and keeping things quiet. Dan got paler with each bit of news, and now his gaze scanned the woods. Thanks for telling me. I'll be keeping the kids inside, and I'll call someone for Debbie. Dylan nodded. Appreciate that. We better be moving on now. See ya in a few days. Sky waved as they backed out of the driveway. Cute family. Are they from around here? Their accent seemed different. They're from the north part of the West Virginia. Moved to the mountains a few years ago for a job. They say they love it up here. I'm sure they do. It's beautiful. Dylan grunted his agreement. The next house was Dylan's friend, Joe, whom Dylan had earlier said he wanted to holler at. Joe appeared at the door before the truck pulled in the driveway. He seemed as alert as Dylan to his surroundings. Dylan had let out a long, low breath on seeing Joe, his lips curving into a slow smile. He threw the vehicle into park and jumped out. It was obvious the two men were close friends, and under normal circumstances, they would never have had an entire front yard separating them. Sky grinned. Joe was just as tall as Dylan but with a thinner frame, still he was built strong enough it was noticeable as he folded his arms and leaned against the side of his house. Sky looked around the property. His modest, fixer-upper cabin seemed in the process of renovations. Joe confirmed that when he told Dylan he was taking advantage of the time to get things done. There were several small outbuildings similar to Dylan and Wade's house. From what Sky could see of Joe and his home, he had the same love of the outdoors as the Coles. And apparently, a penchant for pretty, dark-haired women. After getting a nod from Dylan, Sky jumped out of the truck and came around to stand beside him. Dylan didn't blink an eye when Joe gave a soft whistle and said, "So, who's the good-looking gal you got there, D?" Sky gave Joe a quick smile then looked at the ground and scuffed her foot. "This is Sky. She got stranded along the road. Wade and me brought her home. We're helpin' her out for a while is all," Dylan said, glancing at Sky. "Well, that's real nice of ya," Joe drew out, "real nice indeed." Sky took a small step backward hoping the truck would hide her pink face. "Stop it," Dylan said. "You know it ain't like that. There's a boy too." "Oh, yeah, that changes everything," Joe laughed sarcastically. "Stop," Dylan said again, with a low chuckle. Sky turned to go back to her side of the car. Why do some men have to act like they are 15-year-old hormonal messes no matter what their age? Dylan grabbed her hand. A shock went through her, and she looked at their entwined hands. She warmed to the feel of his rough one against hers. "Sorry," Dylan said, "Joe's not a bad guy, he just likes to tease." Sky raised her head, sure that her thoughts were written all over her face. "I can tell." She uttered a small, nervous laugh. When Joe changed the subject, Sky was relieved. She stood quietly beside Dylan. When would he let go of her hand? She should pull away, but she didn't want to. "Don't do this to yourself. Don't. You are leaving, going home. Let go. Let go right now." Dylan gave her hand a light squeeze and let it go without looking at her. Sky folded her fingers over her palm. She could still feel the warmth he'd left there. "This is just a reaction to the chaos around me. I'm grasping for safety. Literally, it seems." The men's conversation drifted to her, and Sky joined in. "How are things going in Colton? I left there a couple of days ago as the infected were coming through." "Wow," Joe said. "That must have been crazy." "It was." Joe shifted to lean against the doorjamb of his house. "Well, I talked to my granddad yesterday. Some people did get sick from them infected, but most got away, so that is something. The infected haven't been back through again. Heard the sheriff and his men ran them off." "Tom Jackson?" "He's my cousin," Sky said. "Tom Jackson is your cousin?" Joe asked. Surprise covered his face. He stared at Dylan. "You know that?" Dylan gave a slight nod. Joe let out a low whistle. "Well, the plot do thicken, don't it, D?" Dylan looked out at the trees instead of responding. Joe raised an eyebrow and turned to Sky. "Yes ma'am, that's the very one. Heard he did a real good job of shooing them out of there. Sky remembered the first time Tom had been brought up with the Coles. What went on between Tom and them? Dylan wrapped up the visit, though he clearly dreaded doing it. Sky offered her phone number to Joe so he could call Dylan if he needed. Once the truck was on the road again, Sky glanced at Dylan and asked, "So what happened between you and?" Dylan stopped her. "Don't ask," he warned. "But Dylan," she started again. "Don't ask," he said. "You said you didn't need to know, so just drop it." Sky shot him a sidelong glance. The muscle in his jaw twitched more than once. He was being as patient as he could. She put a hand on his forearm. "Okay, sorry. I'm just too curious, but it's between you and Tom." Dylan nodded. "Thanks." Sky turned to watch the landscape as it blurred by and tried to ignore her imagination as it filled in the blanks. "I'm aching to know what this is about. But I won't push for his secrets when I have my own I don't want to share."